If you've ever wondered whether you're neurodivergent or just felt like you see the world a little differently, you're not alone. I was diagnosed autistic at 25, and suddenly, so many things I never had words for started to make sense. Here, I share the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful parts of life through an autistic lens. My name is Elena Carroll, and if you're looking for answers, understanding, or just an autistic friend, you're in the right place. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Before I begin today's video, I do just want to start out with a trigger warning. While this video in no way is meant to be a depressing one, there will be topics of, suicide and contemplating that. So if that is a triggering thing for you to hear about, please click off. There'll be other videos for you to enjoy. But as I said, that is not the purpose of today's video. In fact, it is not even really meant to be a negative video at all. It is purely just meant to be talking about death and why autistic people, why neurodivergent brains really do kind of focus and always come back to the idea of why are we here and what is the purpose of it all. And this topic came to me one morning earlier in the week, and I was having a lot of anxiety around death and the pending death, because everyone's going to die, pending death of my family. Because I am on the other side of the world currently in Toronto and I'm from New Zealand, all of my family are back home, and so I do worry being so far away from them and what is happening when I'm asleep and they're awake and vice versa. And this is not an uncommon thing for me. In fact, since being here, these thought processes happen pretty much every morning. It's in the early hours of the morning, so when I'm feeling incredibly vulnerable. And this as well is not an uncommon thing. I think that this has always been my go-to in life, is stressing and grieving before something has happened. I've mentioned it in other videos before, but my very earliest memories, were quite unfortunate ones. Both my brother and my dad, at the time of my brother's birth, were struggling with really serious health issues, and both were in hospitals. And so I was having to be brought into the two different hospitals, the two different units that they were in. I was at an age where the foundations, the safety that I needed, were, I was scared. I was very fearful. My survival was at stake. I didn't know what was going on with my dad. I didn't know who my brother was because he was in hospital. And my mother was stressed trying to maintain the family unit while all of this was going on. I could tell that things were wrong and that there was a lot of stress, but I was also too young to know what actually was going on, even if it was told to me. And so that kind of set the foundation of my nervous system, that things can go horribly wrong in an instant. And the really incredible and amazing part about this story is that no one actually died. Both my brother and my father are alive despite all the odds that were against them. And so I didn't actually have to face those deaths, I suppose. I didn't actually have to face that. But in my head, for the rest of my childhood and honestly the rest of my life, I have lived as though they are about to die. I have gone so many years just wondering what death is. And it was, I think everyone fears the death of their family to some degree, or the death of themselves. But for me, it has just held such a weight. Like, I always believed that if my family died before me, like, I couldn't survive that. And so I've got quite a weird relationship with death, because I feel like I have faced it every day of my life in some way, but then again I actually haven't. And no one could really soothe me through those fears of really believing that I would wake up the next morning and my brother would be dead, or my mum was dead on the kitchen floor if she hadn't picked me up from school quick enough, believing that my dad had fallen asleep behind the wheel and had driven off a cliff, and no one could say that hasn't happened, because how do you know? Who's to say? So these are some of my own deepest vulnerabilities that I am sharing with you guys. My lifelong vulnerabilities, if you will. It feels a little bit scary, but also nice to be able to share that with you guys. And then to kind of take it a little step further, when I got older and was experiencing my own really poor mental health, I contemplated what death looked like for my own self. It was always me focusing on everybody else and what death meant for them. And suddenly, through the deterioration of being undiagnosed with autism, I found myself heavily depressed, wanting that escape, and then wondering what death looked like. And I remember, just to be really honest with you guys, like this was around, maybe 2 years ago now, and I sat at the kitchen table. It was probably like 11 o'clock at night or something, and I had spent the night kind of crying, losing the plot. And then the thought came to me, like, what if I decide to end it? Like, what does that mean for myself and others? And it was a really scary thing, and also a really profound thing to have witnessed of myself, because now I don't even recognize that person at all. But when I go back to that moment of contemplating death, like, it didn't look at all how I thought it would. It was very quiet. I wasn't crying at that point. I sat there and I was staring at like a point on the table, and I just thought, okay, like, death means I don't see any of this. All of this around me, I don't see. And the two things that came to me in that moment of what I wouldn't experience if I decided to take my life was I wouldn't feel the sun on my skin, and I wouldn't see the smile that I would get when I would pass a stranger. And those were the two things that popped into my brain. As I said, death is a very, very profound, confusing thing, I think, for everybody. And it's not always a negative as well. I do want to point that out. This video is not meant to be like a depresso kind of video. It is, why do autistic people really think about death in the way that they do? And I want to go into that today. I want to have a conversation about that today, to make you kind of feel less alone in these thoughts if you have them. I think it's no secret at this point that autistic people, neurodivergent people, can be extremely hypo-introspective thinkers. We can have very deep thoughts around existential thinking, and the question always remains, like, why are we here? Particularly if you have gone undiagnosed in your life, I think that question of why am I here maybe posed a bigger impact in your life than most, because you can ask yourself constantly, like, why am I going through the struggle in the way that I am? And this was always, I've mentioned this in videos before, but this was always the question that I came back to. Why am I here? Why is it that I have to have this brain and I'm struggling as much as I am and no one else is? And I couldn't understand. I screamed to my mum and to the universe, like, why? Give me a reason why. I know that this is my why now, and it is to literally talk about my experiences and help find a community of people who have also gone through the same things. But, at the time, it was a very, very big question. And so I think naturally our pattern-seeking brains are looking for those answers and looking for the understanding. Perhaps as well, we are structured beings. We love a routine, and so perhaps death acts as this finality. It is kind of this completion, and we can see life as the cycle, and how to make the most of the cycle and have it end in a nice completion. Yeah. I don't know what I was trying to say there. Maybe we are going about our life, making the decisions that we do, having the conversations that we're having, knowing that there is a finality to it all, and always having that in the back of our minds, knowing one day this is all going to end, and that is always factored into our decisions. Coming back to the point about emotional intensity and the depth in which we feel things, I think this goes along with our ability to imagine death. Grief and loss can be felt, I think it is felt in our life every day to some degree. You know, I think change is such a prevalent thing for autistic people because change removes stability and therefore safety. And we can be constantly going through that. And just an everyday life example, like if someone, a family member, a friend came to stay with us and them leaving, like I always struggled with that. I would be in tears the day that a family or friend left staying with me. The whole home felt so wrong, and it would take me a whole day, maybe even the following week, to recover without their presence there. And so there is this continuous feeling of loss and grief, and we can kind of implement this forward grieving so that when it does come one day, whoever it is that we're fearing we're going to lose, our brains kind of think it won't hurt so bad if we've already done the grieving. It can be done in very, very vivid detail, really imagining like horrific ways that people are going to die. And that's so dark, but it is so true because we are trying to imagine just what that loss feels like and the worry that comes with that. It is all done in very vivid detail. And I always thought that this was something very wrong with me, and I now realize it is, you know, a safety mechanism. It is my brain trying to protect itself, and so if those things happen, it won't feel like such a shock. But I also want to acknowledge not all the time is it all about sadness. You know, sometimes it is about curiosity and even forming creative explorations. We can kind of channel these emotions into bigger things. Just to give you guys an example, like when I lost my soul pet Gus, I didn't know what to do with myself. I only knew myself to be his carer in the last 2 years of his life. And so when that was taken away and I had been kind of preparing for his loss, I didn't know what to do with myself, and I felt as though I needed to channel that energy and the meaning of his life for me into something bigger. And so that's when I decided to make the move to go to Canada and make him proud and see that I was continuing on with my life and growing in ways that, you know, I know he would have wanted for me because he saw me so sad for so many years of my life. And so I was able to kind of have that deep reflection and try and channel something good. And that's what I do love about Autistic Brains as well, is just how much we try and create meaning out of terrible and tragic things. While I have talked about, you know, my suicidal thoughts and the concept of death and what that meant to me, it's not always about suicidal thoughts, and it's not always about wanting to die just because we might always be thinking about death. I think that we can find, you know, maybe a bit of peace, particularly if we are going through burnout or existential thoughts. We can kind of get curious and maybe even daydream in some way about what death can feel like. And it's not that we want to die, it's just kind of peaceful to imagine what death means and a life without that stress and that burnout. I know that when people hear us talking about these things, like, what do you think death is? And I've been thinking about death and da-da-da-da, people can raise the alarm bells and go, oh my God, like, do you want to die? And it's not always like that. And I think that I guess that is the message of today's video, is just it is a normal thing, particularly if you have gone through many years of your life being undiagnosed and not knowing yourself and not knowing the world around you. It is, I think, a fairly normal thing to wonder what it all means and what's beyond this point. I think where the dangers come thinking about this is really thinking about the steps to take in order to make that happen. And that is a whole different concept that I am definitely not qualified to talk about, but I am somebody who has also experienced that too, as I stated earlier. So these are just my thoughts around death, and honestly, this has acted more like a therapy session for me than maybe an informative video for you guys. So I do hope that you guys were able to find some assurance, some comfort in some weird, dark way, hearing my thoughts around death. I'm going to leave it there for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I want to remind you guys that if you are looking to find an autistic community, listen to more of my chats, come and chat to me, come and chat to other people. I host talks every Thursday at the same time about all different topics related to the autism experience. The link will always be down below from now on. So please come hang out, check it out. I would love to see you guys. And I also have my social medias if you would like to see more content from me. But thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate you guys more than you would know. Thank you for acting as my therapist today. And I will talk to you guys in the next video. Bye.